Hold on. Welcome back, everybody. We're doing another episode of Indie Reads Aloud, and I'm so excited because I get to do another episode with M Samland. We have such a good time on this program together. Jamie, welcome.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me yet again.
My
enthusiasm.
enthusiasm.
Like the 12th time, 18th time? I don't know.
It's gotta be like 18 or 19 at this point. I mean, you just keep writing. And I told you on the first one, you keep writing, I'll keep having you back. Because you're so much fun. I love your imagination. You're just awesome. You know, being a recovering 6-year-old, you can tell me stories anytime you like, really. So we've gone over this a million times. You live in Canton with your husband. You have cats. You play board games and role playing, and you do home repair, and you do martial arts, and I don't know how all those things fit in your head all at once. In addition to all this wonderful eclectic writing that you do. The book you're going to read from today is the first in your short story collection called Ooh Shiny. And I just love that you feature squirrels because short story collections, really, the totem for a short story collection, I think you're right, needs to be a squirrel. Because we're constantly jumping from one genre to the next and not staying with any one for any specific period of time. So I think your totem for these is just ideal. And the idea of it being shiny is that it just, I think you hit gold with this.
Really. Well, I think my tagline, I'm starting to put together prompts and ideas for the fourth one, and I think my tagline might be, there's finally a squirrel in this one. Because people are disappointed that there are no squirrels. They're like, so is the book about squirrels? No, there's actually no squirrels. It's just my mascot for my squirrel brain.
Yeah, which is valid.
Yeah, it's valid.
So this one is multi-genre short stories. And anybody who's curious, you can go back in our episode list. And actually, Jamie's already read from book 2, but we're kind of going backwards and reading from book 1 just because we like to throw weird things out into the universe. And, you know, it's about a squirrel, so you can do things out of order.
Do it as you please.
So today, you're going to read a couple of short stories for us. Just give us an idea of the genres that each one of these stories represents.
Well, so most of these stories start from some kind of like a writing prompt of something that I got. Like write about a character who, one of them that I'll be reading, write about a character who regrets selling something. Or I can't recall what the one about the Krispy Kreme, where that one came from. You know, there was one, I'm going to read Pleasant Day, Charlie Jacobson, which it was a prompt that just had like 8 characters in it, and it was just an image, and it said, pick 2 of these and write about it for 15 minutes. So I wrote this short story. Another friend that was at the table wrote an entire novel about it.
Wow.
About 2 different characters. So a lot of these short stories are just kind of all over the place in their genre. I try to have some sort of a weird twist to it.
That's
something
always fun.
Fun in some way. I believe so. I think for Shiny 2, I had read the chicken, which was a chicken crossing the road, and the chicken caused like an existential crisis within the road.
Yes.
That sort of sums me up, I guess, in that.
The existential crisis part?
Well, the writing from the perspective of the road.
Right. Okay.
So not always going where I thought where I didn't always think that you would be going in that direction.
That's some of the fun with short stories, though, is that because you don't have to do a lot of pre-planning and mapping, you can just kind of play with it. Even in the short stories that Drake and I have written together, I just kind of let the little quacker do his thing, and I just kind of take dictation. So it is kind of a different approach to the passionate plotting than I normally do. Sure. And it can be fun if you just let it go. Okay, I am all set. We're going to try to read a few here in the next 15 minutes. We'll see how many we can squeeze in. I'm very excited. When you are ready, please take the microphone and read aloud.
All right, this is the first story in the first Shiny, Goblin Assault. Trevor breathed out and steadied his aim. The bowstring twanged by his ear, and the arrow flew true. The goblin grabbed at the shaft protruding from its shoulder and fell from the makeshift ladder, crashing into and knocking off the one behind it. There are too many of them! Trevor knocked again and readied his aim. The ranger's arrows always flew true, and this was no exception, as it hit the next goblin in the center of its chest. Protect the crystal! Caleb yelled and clashed swords with the goblins that flooded over the railing side of the sanctuary. He parried and pushed, getting a foot up to kick a green-skinned beast back. It screamed a shrill scraping noise as it fell to a messy death 100 feet below. Raji, we need that protective spell! The third of their band knelt in the center of the forest sanctuary, hovering over the sacred crystal of the North Forest. Raji arranged the arcane dusts, twigs, and gleaming gems that provided the power of his art. I'm almost there, he shouted. Despite the concentration his work required, he aimed a shot of fire at the back of a goblin as it ran at Cablin's back. It exploded across the creature's flanks and to throw it screaming off the platform's edge. Raji closed his eyes and called to the ancient spirits of the forest that clung to this divine place. They were slow to respond, content to remain in their quiet slumber, but his will overpowered their desire to remain at rest, and his hands radiated soft blue light as he waved them over his artifacts. I'm out of arrows, Trevor bellowed, and swung his bow like a staff, knocking back each goblin as they surged forward. Ah, they got me! Caleb dropped to a knee and held his leg, blood pouring around his fingers. A goblin raised his sword, preparing to land the final blow and end one of the three protectors of one of the three protectors of the forest. Caleb's fingers clasped the hilt of his father's dagger hidden in his boot and held his breath, waiting for the moment to strike. A flash of white shot through the goblin's chest. It looked down in confusion, stumbled back, and toppled off the platform. What was that? Caleb shot to his feet. A magic arrow, Trevor said, and for emphasis, shot another into a goblin as it swung over the top of the ladder. You said you were out, said Caleb. Yeah, but I have magic arrows too. Since when? I killed enough goblins, I learned a new power. You can't level up in the middle of a battle, Trevor. I have cast the spell, Raji announced from the center of the platform. A soft golden light washed over the three harmlessly and destroyed the few remaining goblins. The crystal is safe. Trevor cheated. Caleb hopped and tossed down his sword. No, he didn't. Trevor raised his bow and a glistening arrow appeared between his fingers as he pulled back the string, aimed for his comrade. You can't shoot me. The battle's over. You guys suck. Trevor threw down his bow and descended the ladder he'd been defending. Boys, the warden of the forest calls them from a distance. Dinner time. Just a cute little one. Let's move on to Great Aunt Ida. According to my mother, this is an example of the top-notch, absolute best fiction ever written. She's biased. This is based on a character who regrets something. I don't know if he quite gets to regret this post. Great Aunt Ida. I raised my face to the sun as the jingle of the pawn shop door faded behind me. A warm breeze carried with it the first hints of spring, the dirt and bacteria of petrichor mixed with the well-meaning blossoms. My hand brushed over the pocket, bulging with 10s and 20s. Well, more 10s than 20s, the 120 and 3 10s. But enough for a respectable dinner, as long as Neil didn't want to drink with it. That was easy enough to fix. I suggested vodka and dew before we left the apartment. I crossed the parking lot, cracked and dotted with brilliant yellow dandelions, and leaned atop the bus stop shelter. My eyes automatically scanned the decals of bands long broken up, and a flyer for piano lessons and tattoos, both of the same number. The bus hissed to a stop, and I swiped my card, taking the first open seat. The bills in my pocket called for attention again. I spared a glance back at the rundown strip mall just as the bus turned the first corner. Something nagged in the back of my mind. Regret? Shame? No, my apartment was small. Too small for the fireplace that took up half the living room, and too small for the gaudy blue and gold vase that took up half that mantle. Half and half. That thing took up like a quarter of my living room. No one could fault me for tidying up my life and bringing my own style into my living. Marie Kondo would be proud. The old vase, always loud and proud on my mom's fireplace, until this morning, mine, never sparked joy. Now I'd get a mediocre steak dinner outfit. Still, my mind looked back at the sad little pawn shop full of sad, discarded crap. A smile slid across my lips. Mom always described her great Aunt Ida's house that way. bursting with worthless trinkets and collectibles, musty with a coat of dust over things that hadn't been touched or thought about in a decade. I never met Great Aunt, but I imagine I'd be stuck going to her place for long, terrible summer afternoons, sharing time with equally terrible second cousins that, other than being around my age, I had nothing in common with. I hope the pawn shop owner did something with Great Aunt Ida before reselling the vase. It was her urn. Let's see. I'm gonna do as best he could. This was one of my favorite ones. I got so much time. I got several stories. As best he could. The deep stench of ancient decay and moldering fabric stung Gerald's nose. Well, it would if he still had a nose. That fell off years ago. Decades? Who knows? It was hard to remember with a brain mostly eaten by mice. Whatever force allowed him to think also gave him sight without eyes. He watched through the single crack in the stone as the procession passed him with their faces downcast and shrouded behind veils. They sang a slow dirge in a language Gerald vaguely remembered. He shifted closer to the wall and tried to call out as their light and song were lost around the corner. Gerald sighed as best he could and flopped away from the crack to lie in the complete darkness. He drummed bony fingers over his ribs, tapping out the dirge tune and using his spine for bass notes. He felt a tug deep in his chest and shooed away the giant rat, trying to make off the last bit of organ still there. Other than bits of brain, it was all he had left of his fleshy bits, and Gerald protected it fiercely. People were talking, and Gerald spun back to the crack. He heard hushed tones in an ancient dialect so thick it strained Gerald's mice-eaten brains to understand. The Dark One's minions have been destroyed, one said, and stopped just in front of the wall. Sir Unir slew the last Lich Lord in the east. Brilliant news! Excellent, said the second. I never imagined I would feel relief to be in the catacombs, not after fighting the undead since the time of our great-great-grandsires. The first laughed. I understand the sentiment, but the royal catacombs were the first to be cleansed when the Dark Lord spread his foul magics and raised the dead 100 years ago. All the risen here were put down ages ago. Gerald frowned as best he could. He seemed to remember a man in shiny armor rushing by, brandishing relics as bright as the sun. What small amount of light that had made it through the crack in the wall hurts, and it hadn't been that much. Back then, Gerald was driven by a desire to get at those men and rip and bloody shards in the name of the Dark One, the true master of the world that would herald its end. But no, that couldn't be right. Gerald didn't want to hurt anybody. Even the rat wanted so badly to eat his last fleshy bit, he just shooed away, though he'd always been kinder with the rat's advice. It had only been recently that his thirst for human suffering had appeared. Gerald tried to make a sound with men, but that was long ago impossible. He tapped at his ribs, but he heard that as a vibration traveling through his bones rather than a sound in the air. He took the massive gold ring from his left hand and pushed it through the crack in the wall. For a moment, he worried it was stuck until it fell free with a sharp clatter between the speakers. What is? One started, and Gerald saw a fleshy hand take the ring. It's a signet. How did this get here? They murmured back and forth for a moment, breathy voices too low for Gerald to make out, before darting away and taking their torchlight with them. Gerald laid back and cursed as best he could. While he was distracted by the pair speaking about a Dark One and undead, the rat made off with his last fleshy bits. Time meant little when the infrequent funeral procession was the only way to tell its passing. Gerald found himself missing the rats that left him alone, now with no fleshy bits, and he wondered why the mice weren't coming back for the rest of his brains. Was there something wrong with the brains he had left? What if he had no brains left, and only thought he did? He couldn't very well look inside his own head. Finally, torchlight shone through the crack, along with shouted orders. Something crashed against the wall again and again, until the light flooded in as stones were removed one after another. The light was almost touching Gerald when he heard a gasp, and the work paused. This is the tomb of King Gerald the XII. He united the outer islands 200 years ago and was arguably our greatest king. Take the utmost care. The stones were being removed again, but more slowly. Gerald froze. In the increased light, he looked back to the sarcophagus he crawled out of ages ago, and again frowned as best he could. These people revered him. If he acted like a normal skeleton, as was expected to act, they would gather up his bones he scattered over the years. Oh, that would be nice. He'd lost his legs and pelvis coming out of the stone coffin. Then they would place him with the dearest reverence back in there to spend all eternity in total darkness. No dirges to drum along with, no mice to shoo away. The first light in centuries touched Gerald. The first light to ever touch his bare ribs. A bearded face poked through the hole in the wall and gasped with the excited little sound. Another few moments and Gerald was fully in the light, still unmoving. It's really him, the scholar said, and knelt beside him, or glancing at the empty sarcophagus. He must have been risen by the Dark One's call and trapped back here. He returned to his eternal rest as Sir Unir defeated the last minions of that foul monster. Come, let us clean up the king's vestments and place them again to rest. Gerald frowned as best he could. He wouldn't spend forever in a box. Only one other option. He raised an arm and waved. Got 5 minutes left. I'm gonna do one more. Glitter bomb. Glitter bomb. This is a reference to I often when I sign copies of Shiny One, I often reference this particular story. Glitter bomb. Towering stacks belched smoke, choking the evening sky. In the shadow of stacks was nestled a pub carved from an overgrown mushroom. Within the pub, a dozen gnomes sat atop their stools, contemplating frothy ales after a long day on their feet. Not all gnomes drank alone. In fact, 2 sat beside each other in animated conversation. Ugh, I'm still covered in glitter, Nessibar complained and brushed his arms. Don't touch it, it'll just spread, said Rontsif, waving for his brother to stop touching himself. That's what you get for working where you do. Nessibar shot a scathing look. So sorry I can't work in a bird flipping garden all day, standing around doing gosh darn nothing. Hey! Ronkspear glanced around nervously at the other patrons, sitting on their soft cat stools. There's no need to use that kind of language. I can probably still get you a job, but you have to start in an entry-level position. Nessibar leaned back and crossed his arms. Perfectly fine with the plant. I don't need your handouts. Oh, come on, brother. Don't think of it like that. Being a garden gnome is in our blood. I work beside 4 generations of our people every day. You can't really be happy working at a meat packing plant. What do you even do there? I can't imagine they have a machine that a gnome could use. Ogregar Farms has made several important advancements in the last few years, and are one of the Empire's top employers of mythical and natural creatures. We can get proper jobs now, Ronsphere. We're not bound by the same racial bias and constraints of our father and his before. You sound like a commercial. Shish. Ronsphere lifted his mug of mead and turned back towards the bar. I'm Chief Inspector of Final Product. So you look over all the meat before it goes out on trucks? The fairy meat? No wonder you're always covered in glitter. If you knew how many contaminants there are in fairy meat, you would be shocked. They bring it in a fairy, looks fine, slaughter it, and you look through and take it through all the selection lines. It still looks fine. But once it's under cellophane and particular lighting, then all you can see, the fairy was cursed. I end up rejecting a full quarter of product, and you should be glad it isn't making it to the market. Roxbury eyed the bearded and fried fairy sticks. I'm sorry, the breaded and fried fairy sticks in front of them with suspicion. Oh gosh, what do you do with all the rejects? It's all incinerated by the end of the day. Well, if you can get only a slightly cursed, if you can get only a slightly cursed fairy short or ribs cheap, see if you can send it my way. My anniversary is coming up, and I'd love a surprise. I'd love to surprise Vasani with a home-cooked fairy rib and baked mushroom dinner. Well, Nessibar glanced around the bar and nudged closer to his brother. You didn't hear from me, but Ogregar Farms is about to start a new product line. I asked you for drinks because I wanted to tell you I'm getting promoted to senior chief inspector, transferred to the fairy line. New product. Ronsphere gasped and grabbed his brother by the elbows. Is it bugbear? I've always wanted to taste bugbear, but I've heard they're borderline sentient. That's like frowned upon. Is it basilisk? Nessibar grinned and waggled his eyebrows. Kraken? Better, Nessibar said and lowered his voice to a breathy whisper. We're getting into unicorn. Ronkspear's eyes went wide with another gasp. No way. Wow, bro, I'm happy for you. That'll be fun. But, Ronkspear chuckled, you'll meet me in the bar covered in rainbows instead of glitter. They both laughed and clacked their mugs together in a toast. Yay, unicorn meat! It's delicious.
The transfer from fairy meat to unicorn meat, it's kind of a leap, wouldn't you think?
Well, I mean, it is a very different creature, I suppose.
I suppose. That would explain why there
bugbears
aren't
are
any of
taboo.
them left, though. The gnomes ate
I'm
them
so-
all.
well, if there are fairies and bugbears and kraken, then there are probably unicorns around. They probably farm them.
Farm
Free range unicorn.
free range, right? Free range kraken is a whole other conversation,
Very
though.
large, very large tanks for that one.
I love the story about Gerald. You got to
Oh
tell
yeah.
me, where did that come from?
So I think that one was writing about a character that was once cursed by the Dark One. The Dark One just being close, whatever that happened to be.
Being
And I
like the
thought,
generic bad guys in Top
yeah,
Gun
just the
with,
generic bad guy
yeah,
that does all the
yeah,
event
yeah.
stuff. So I thought, well, okay, but wouldn't it be fun if this guy was unable to act upon the urges? The Dark One raises him, and then he's unable to do anything like monstrous while he's up. So he just drags himself out of his crypt and then is stuck there. So it's a little bit bad.
I just love
100 years stuck behind a wall.
all the references to his fleshy bits. I just love that. And it's so much fun. And the idea of the last of his brains not being edible, that was also
Right.
fun.
Did he only think he had brains? How was he supposed to know?
Yeah, right.
I guess he wouldn't
That
want to poke in there.
was super fun. And
Hmm.
again, your totem being a squirrel absolutely is represented in this collection of short stories. You really do jump from one brain aneurysm to the next. I mean,
They're
really,
a bit all over the place, yes.
so much
Mhm.
fun. I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to the next time you come on the program, and I'm so glad that you made us chuckle today. Thank you so
Oh,
much.
thank you so much for having me. It's always a lot of fun.
Sure.